on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. The police in Waukesha have now confirmed the identity of the person of interest we identified earlier in the show, this 39-year-old dude from Milwaukee who allegedly is the driver of the vehicle that drove through that crowd of Waukesha families enjoying Christmas parade, killing at least 5 and injuring at least 40 yesterday afternoon. This is an individual. He has not been charged yet. We'll wait to hear more from law enforcement. But this is an individual, what we know of him, in addition to a long criminal history, in addition to having bonded out as recently as Friday, in addition to enjoying, apparently, the beneficence of Chris Holm, the Milwaukee County DA, who's another Soros-backed local prosecutor like we have with Kim Foxx in Cook County. We know from his social media posts that he commented on the Rittenhouse trial negatively in terms of the verdict. He had a picture and another social media post of Scott Walker dressed up as a Nazi. He had spoken positively about BLM. And so we don't know motive. He hasn't been charged yet, but what I've just outlined is what we do know. We also know we're getting reactions like this from the left. I love it when they show us who they are. Mary Lemansky is apparently the social media director, or was, of the DuPage County Democrat Party. Of course. She tweeted out a series on this. I'm sure he, meaning the driver in Waukesha, didn't want to hurt people. He came to help people. What? It's obviously a reference to Rittenhouse.
Oh.
She goes on to say, to tweet, "You reap what you sow. It's sad people died, but when you open the door to vigilante justice, everyone seems threatening."
We don't know the circumstances of this, and you have to wait it out before you make stupid, idiotic comments like that.
Well, she is a perfect every woman for your leftist suburban white chick.
Take off your pea hat and open your ears. How about that? Because this is a witness who was on the ground and describes what happened.
We saw him swerve right into the children from the baseball team, the parents that were marching with them. The one father of the baseball team had pushed his child out of the way, and he took the blunt end of the vehicle. He went down, and all chaos just erupted.
And a lot of the injured had to drive themselves to the hospital because there was, it was just chaotic.
So we'll continue to keep the case updated, as well as Mike Scott and our news team will all day as the situation develops. But for more on the topic and, of course, the Rittenhouse verdict, pleased to be joined by Congressman Bryan Steil. He's a Republican congressman for Wisconsin's 1st Congressional District, which, of course, covers Kenosha. Bryan, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
I know Waukesha is not your district, but obviously as a cheesehead, I'm sure you want to comment. So, your reaction to what happened yesterday and what we know to this point.
Yeah, just absolutely heartbreaking to see what should be and has been a family-centered event become this tragic. I talked to one gentleman who was in the parade. He just finished and started walking the parade route back to get to his car when the car that drove by him. Horrific scene. One of the images that really stood out in my mind was an abandoned stroller. You can just imagine the fear that so many parents were having as this car was coming through. You hope it's a mom or dad who was able to snatch their kid and get them to safety, but you just don't know. So many lives lost, so many individuals injured. And now is really a time to stand with the men and women of law enforcement as they're going through and making a thorough investigation to make sure we get everybody involved in this, the individual or individuals, and then ultimately fully hold them accountable. And so I think what's so important is instead of the statements that we're seeing on social media that you just highlighted, Instead, we pause, we reflect, we stand with law enforcement, we allow them to conduct their investigation, and then we allow the Justice Department to truly hold this person accountable and punish them appropriately for their actions.
We know, we got a note from a friend, the Archdiocese of Milwaukee reporting one of their priests and multiple Catholic school children are among the injured in Waukesha. The cousin of a friend of mine's friend also badly injured. She's only 3 years old. So we know that there were children that were seriously injured or worse in addition to adults. And so, as you say, wait for law enforcement to identify the individuals. But this is going to be bad.
It's absolutely heartbreaking. The congressional district line goes up to the village of Waukesha, which is the border with the city. And I just can't tell you how many people, everybody in this community either was at the parade, in the parade, or knows somebody who was. And it is just heartbreaking for the city of Waukesha and the broader community.
I want to get your reaction, moving over to the Rittenhouse verdict and this exchange between Rittenhouse's defense attorney Mark Richards and Fredo Cuomo on CNN on Friday night after the verdict, talking specifically about Rosenbaum, because it's Richards' contention, basically, the state brought the case mainly because of Rosenbaum. That was the trigger that got them to bring charges, in his opinion. But he and Cuomo went back and forth about Wisconsin state law as it pertains to self-defense.
His judgment in running after a person, as he yelled on the tape, and it was clearly visible, you aren't going to do SMFer. And he believed Kyle didn't have the guts to do it. He was wrong, and he paid with his life.
Well, I don't know that it's guts. I think it's bad judgment. It was justified under the law, but I think it's hard, and that's why I asked the question. It's hard to believe that somebody chasing you is going to beat you to death.
Why else was he chasing him, Chris?
Probably to get him and beat him up, hurt him. But again, my problem is with the law here. Look, we don't know what he was going to do. All we know now, we do, because now we know that none of the people involved here ever killed anybody before or are known for that kind of violence. But he didn't know that in the moment. This law.
Chris Cuomo is a muddled mess. But Brian, you're hearing this, the no duty to retreat, and that the Wisconsin law as it pertains to self-defense is somehow so markedly different than self-defense laws in other jurisdictions. Your comment on that?
Yeah, what we have seen is the jury actually review the facts and reach a unanimous conclusion. And so in the United States, you're tried under the court of law, not under the court of public opinion. And so many on the left want to try Kyle Rittenhouse under the court of public opinion. We are a country of laws, and we need to be. I think what's so important is we also need to reflect on why was everybody there in the first place? They were there because our Democratic liberal governor refused to provide the resources that were needed to reestablish public safety for 3 nights in a row. Nobody should have been on the street, and we could have prevented that had we provided the resources that were needed. We need to remember that Tuesday morning, our Democratic governor, Tony Evers, rejected an offer of assistance from President Donald Trump to help to end the violence in the first place. None of this would have occurred if our Democratic governor, Tony Evers, had done his job.
And now you've got, Jacob Blake's uncle was out there, Bishop Travis Grant, saying that they're going to hit you guys economically. This is what they said last night during their march.
This is a new day. Those who finance this defense, those who are using him as a poster child for justice, you've just awakened a giant. You've just awakened the conscience of a people that will not take no for an answer.
So what do you make of that? And what, they're going to economically boycott Kenosha too?
It's hard to figure out what everybody's trying to say here on this. What we should walk away with is an understanding that the people that actually reviewed the facts, 12 individuals randomly chosen in Kenosha County, reviewed the facts of the case, applied it to the law, and unanimously determined Kyle Rittenhouse was not guilty. It's a moment to say, let's respect the rule of law, let's respect the outcome of the jury, rather than trying to continue to make up the facts, create them, try individuals under the court of public opinion. We are a country of laws. Let's move on. Let's allow Kenosha to move on and actually come back and build better. We don't need people coming into the community of Kenosha with their thoughts and opinions and hurting the community even more than it's already been damaged by this case.
Well, but it's also important to make sure we have sort of an understanding of self-defense, so people know where the lines are, what the law is, and aren't confused about that. That's why this case was so important beyond Rittenhouse's fate. It's the question of the rule of law and a person's ability to provide for their own self-defense. And when you have Chris Cuomo, and frankly the prosecution, suggesting that that you have some moral obligation to take a beating, that's just a remarkable statement. Again, in Wisconsin, yes, there's no duty to retreat, but the standard is very similar to the standard in most jurisdictions, which is reasonable person. If the person reasonably believes, so that's the reasonable person standard, reasonably believes that he could suffer serious bodily harm or death, then he has the ability to defend himself. And that was what the jury concluded in this case, that it was reasonable for Rittenhouse to do what he did in the context.
Absolutely, right? And the jury reached a unanimous verdict after reviewing all the facts. And so there's many on the left that have just been making completely dangerous and irresponsible comments, many of them providing facts that are not true, rather than analyzing the case and respecting the jury's verdict. If you actually look at the facts of the case, I think the outcome of the jury is not terribly surprising. But what many on the left want to do is create their own series of facts and try him in the court of public opinion, not helpful to anyone.
I wanted to get your reaction to this former New York Times reporter, Nellie Bowles, saying that the New York Times held a story about the Kenosha riots until after the 2020 election. She had done a story that was supposed to be how, it's no big deal that businesses were burned down because they all have insurance. And she writes, it turned out not to be true. The part of Kenosha that people burned in the riots was the poor, multiracial commercial district full of small, uninsured cell phone shops and car lots. It was very sad to see and hear from people who had suffered. That was her report that was spiked until after the election. Now, the obvious disgust that the New York Times deserves for being in the tank for the Biden administration and not wanting any negative press about what rioters had done to a community, but part of Kenosha that she's referencing in her report that finally got published. What is the state of that area of Kenosha now?
Kenosha's come back a long ways, but it still has room to grow. I remember walking downtown through the 4th of July parade, and there was one building that stuck out in my mind that still was boarded up and spray painted on the boards that said, "Don't burn this building. People live here," with an arrow pointing up. There's an apartment above, the commercial space on the ground floor. You got to remember the individuals and the criminals that were rioting, that were burning buildings, were doing so and risking the lives of regular people that were living in these apartments. Many people who had nothing to do with the event in the first place, or none of them who did. It was absolutely despicable. And so the scars following 3 nights of rioting like this last a long time. But overall, Kenosha's come back well, but there's still room to go. And now that the Kyle Rittenhouse case is in the rearview mirror, hopefully the community can really continue to come together and rebuild stronger than ever before.
I mentioned Chris Holm, the DA in Milwaukee County, in connection with that Waukesha massacre yesterday. And his treatment of the person of interest in previous criminal cases, including bonding him out for $1,000 on Friday. What about the DA in Kenosha, Gravely? Where has he been?
Oh, that's right.
When is he going to be called to account for approving charges in the pursuit of this case to begin with? Where is he going to be held to account to answer for the performance of his prosecutors, the case they put on? Where is this guy?
You're asking a great question, and why is he not out front owning this? But what we see from prosecutors across the country, whether or not it's Milwaukee or Kenosha, or you guys deal with this in Cook County all the time, is prosecutors not willing to actually bring charges against true criminals, but are rather willing to grandstand on one-off cases. We see it time and again where criminals are given an easy pass. They come back out, they offend again, they make our communities less safe. We cannot stand with some of these woke prosecutors. We actually have to enforce the rule of law and allow our communities to become safe once again, as we see the significant crime wave travel across the United States through all of our major cities.
He is Bryan Steil. He's a Republican congressman for Wisconsin's 1st congressional district, right over the border, Kenosha and surrounding areas. Bryan, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, good luck to you and your community. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
Balance of Nature's fruits and vegetables in a capsule, changing the world one life at a time.
I enjoy the product. I'm a disabled New York State correction officer and World Trade Center respondent 2001.